Neighbors are devastated after a new mother was shot and killed by her husband, who then took his own life. It all happened in Brookwood Hospital less than 24 hours ago. A Jefferson County coroner's report says Precious Johnson was shot multiple times. Authorities say she was a patient in the hospital. Family members say the 24-year-old had just had a baby with her husband, 19-year-old Kenneth Terry Jr. According to the coroner, Terry died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Homewood police think the hospital shooting was a domestic-related murder-suicide. WVTM 13's Lisa Crane joins us live and local from Brookwood Hospital. Lisa, you spoke with family members in the Alabama Hospital Association today. What have you learned?
Well, I did speak with Kenneth Terry's mother today. As you can imagine, she is devastated. She did not want to speak on camera, but she told me she just can't understand what happened. She said this young couple was having some marital problems, and Precious Johnson did not want Terry's family at the hospital when she delivered the baby, but she still can't comprehend that her son could be violent. 19-year-old Kenneth Terry had a lot going on in his life. His mother tells me he had finished Army National Guard boot camp, had married 24-year-old Precious Johnson, and they were expecting a baby. But Sunday night, after Johnson delivered her baby, authorities say Terry shot her several times and then turned the gun on himself.
A baby was just born inside a hospital room. Doctors and nurses had finished helping the mother. The room should have been a place of joy and new life. But only minutes later, something shocking happened. A husband stood inside the same hospital room. A conversation started between him and his wife. The words spoken in that moment changed everything. Within minutes, the hospital room turned into a crime scene. A young mother named Precious Johnson was shot and killed. She was only 24 years old, and the person accused of doing it was her own husband. A newborn baby had just entered the world, but that same moment also became a moment of loss. Tonight, we are looking at the story of Precious Johnson, what happened inside that hospital room, what led to this moment, and what decisions changed many lives forever. Before we begin, if stories of media ignore deserve justice, then subscribe to Unseen Crime Dossiers right now. Like this video so more people can see the truth, and comment below if you believe these voices deserve to be heard. Share this story, because awareness can change everything. Welcome to Unseen Crime Dossiers, where the stories the world tries to forget are finally uncovered. Stay with us, because every case you'll see is shocking, true, and you won't want to miss a single detail. Precious Johnson was a 24-year-old woman who was preparing to enter a new stage of life as a parent. She lived as many young adults do, managing daily responsibilities while planning for the future. People who knew her said she was focused on building a stable life and preparing for the arrival of her child. During the months before birth, much of her attention was directed toward pregnancy and the changes that come with becoming a mother. She attended medical appointments, followed advice from healthcare professionals, and prepared the basic items needed for a newborn. For many parents, this time is used to organize a home, learn about childcare, and plan for the responsibilities that begin after a baby is born. Precious was in the same position as many first-time mothers who are learning how life will change once a child arrives. Her background shows a young woman who was part of a normal community environment. She had family connections and social relationships that were typical for someone in her age group. People who interacted with her described her as someone who spoke about the future and about caring for her baby once the child was born. Like many expectant mothers, she spent time thinking about practical needs such as baby clothing, feeding supplies, and the space where the child would sleep. Preparing for a newborn often involves small steps taken over many weeks. These steps can include setting up a crib, collecting blankets, and making sure the home environment is ready for an infant. Precious followed the same process of preparation that many parents experience before birth. Pregnancy also involves regular medical supervision. During this period, doctors and nurses monitor both the health of the mother and the development of the baby. Precious attended hospital visits where healthcare staff checked her condition and the progress of the pregnancy. These visits help ensure that the baby is developing properly and that the mother remains healthy. For someone expecting their first child, these appointments can also provide information about labor, delivery, and the first days after birth. Through these visits, Precious received guidance about what to expect when the time came to go to the hospital. Medical professionals often explain how labor works, what equipment will be used in the maternity ward, and how mothers can recover after delivery. As the pregnancy progressed, the date of delivery became closer. In many cases, families mark this time as an important milestone. The final weeks before birth are often spent confirming plans for transportation to the hospital, arranging help from relatives, and preparing necessary documents. Precious reached this stage as well. Her life during this time revolved around the upcoming birth and the responsibilities that would follow. A newborn requires constant care, and many parents begin learning about feeding schedules, sleep routines, and doctor visits even before the baby arrives. Precious was entering this period with the expectation that she would soon begin raising her child. People who later spoke about Precious described her daily life as structured around simple routines. Like many young adults, she managed normal tasks such as communication with family members, planning for expenses, and maintaining relationships with those close to her. Expectant mothers often experience changes in lifestyle during pregnancy, including adjustments to diet, rest, and physical activity. Precious followed medical advice designed to support a healthy delivery. These steps are common for pregnant women and are recommended to reduce risks for both mother and baby. Her situation reflected the typical preparation process seen in many households expecting a new child. The arrival of a baby usually represents the beginning of a long period of parenting. Many parents talk about plans for education, living arrangements, and the environment in which they are. Children will grow. Precious had begun thinking about similar issues while waiting for her delivery date. Friends and relatives said she spoke about providing care and guidance for a child as the baby grew older. These conversations are common among new parents who are thinking about long-term responsibilities. They often discuss where the child will live, who will help with childcare, and how the family will adjust to the new addition. Precious was approaching the stage of planning shortly before the birth took place. Understanding the background of Precious Johnson provides context to the events that later occurred. Before the incident that brought attention to her story, she was known primarily as a young woman preparing to become a mother. Her life included the ordinary steps associated with pregnancy and the anticipation of raising a newborn. She was waiting for the moment when she would leave the hospital with her child and begin daily life as a parent. That expectation placed her in the same position as many individuals who enter a maternity ward with plans to start the next chapter of family life. Her background, therefore, represents the starting point of the story that investigators would later examine in detail. The night Precious Johnson arrived at the hospital began like many maternity admissions that take place every day. She was brought into the maternity ward where medical staff prepared for the delivery of her child. Nurses monitored her condition and recorded information about the progress of labor. Doctors moved between rooms, checking on patients and giving instructions to the nursing team. Inside the hospital, the environment followed the usual procedures designed to support safe childbirth. Medical equipment was arranged near the bed, and staff members communicated with one another as they prepared for the delivery. For Precious, this moment marked the final stage of a long pregnancy. After months of preparation and regular medical visits, the time had come for the baby to enter the world. As labor progressed, hospital staff focused on guiding the delivery step by step. Healthcare workers are trained to monitor both the mother and the baby during this process. Machines recorded heart rates and other important signs to make sure everything remained stable. Nurses checked in frequently, adjusting equipment and updating the medical chart. The room remained controlled and organized as the team worked through the stages of childbirth. Eventually, the baby was delivered. The medical staff completed their responsibilities to ensure the newborn was breathing and healthy. At that point, the basic medical process of birth had been completed. A new child had entered the world, and Precious had become a mother. After delivery, hospitals usually allow time for recovery and observation. Nurses continue checking the mother's condition, while also making sure the newborn is stable. In many cases, this is a period when family members begin visiting the room to see the baby. Visitors may come in quietly, speak with the mother, and observe the newborn resting nearby. On this night, Precious remained in the hospital room after the birth while the staff carried out standard post-delivery care. Medical workers moved between rooms in the ward, performing routine checks and responding to the needs of other patients. The environment was calm and structured according to hospital procedure. At some point during this period, Precious's husband entered the hospital room. Family members commonly visit mothers soon after delivery, and the maternity ward allows these visits within specific rules set by the hospital. When he arrived, the two adults were alone inside the room for a period of time. Conversations between family members often occur during this stage after birth, when relatives speak privately with the mother while medical staff work elsewhere in the ward. The setting remained a typical hospital patient room containing medical equipment, seating for visitors, and the bed where Precious was recovering from the delivery. During the conversation between Precious and her husband, investigators later reported that an important statement was made. According to the information that later became part of the case, Precious told her husband that the baby was not his. This statement introduced a serious issue into the conversation taking place inside the hospital room. Situations involving personal relationships can change quickly when unexpected information is revealed. What began as a visit between two adults inside a maternity ward had now turned into a tense discussion. At this point in the timeline, no hospital staff members were directly involved in the conversation happening inside the room. Authorities later stated that the situation escalated rapidly after that moment. Within a short time, the husband produced a firearm while still inside the hospital room. Hospitals are normally considered secure medical environments, but incidents can occur if a weapon enters the building without being detected. The presence of a firearm in the maternity ward changed the situation immediately. Precious Johnson was shot during this confrontation. The sound of the gunshot drew attention from hospital staff working nearby. Medical personnel rushed toward the room to understand what had happened and to respond as quickly as possible. Hospital workers attempted to provide emergency assistance once they reached the room, following the same training used during any critical medical event. However, Precious Johnson died from the injuries she received during the incident. Police officers were called to the hospital shortly afterward. The maternity room where the baby had just been delivered became the focus of a law enforcement investigation. Officers secured the area and began collecting information about what had taken place. Witness statements, hospital records, and evidence from the scene were gathered as part of the investigation. The newborn child survived the event and remained under medical care, while authorities continued examining the circumstances that led to the shooting. The confrontation that occurred inside the hospital room began during the period shortly after the baby had been delivered. Precious Johnson remained in the maternity ward recovering from childbirth, while hospital staff continued their routine work in nearby rooms. Medical workers moved through the hallway assisting other patients, completing reports, and checking equipment used during deliveries. Inside Precious's room, the environment appeared normal from the outside. A hospital bed stood in the center of the room, medical tools were positioned nearby, and a newborn baby was present following the recent delivery. During this stage, the room had temporarily become a private space where conversations between family members could occur without interruption from Precious's husband was inside the room with her during this time. Family visits often happen soon after birth, and maternity wards regularly allow close relatives to enter patient rooms under hospital guidelines. The two adults spoke privately while the hospital staff continued their duties elsewhere in the ward. Investigators later focused closely on what was said during that conversation because it became the turning point in the events that followed. According to statements gathered during the investigation, Precious told her husband that the baby was not his. This information introduced a serious issue into the discussion taking place inside the hospital room. The statement changed the direction of the interaction between the two adults. Situations involving unexpected revelations can quickly alter the tone of a conversation. Law enforcement officials later examined the timeline to understand exactly how the exchange developed after this moment. At first, the discussion continued between them without hospital staff present in the room. Investigators later described this part of the sequence as the beginning of the confrontation. The room still contained the same medical equipment and hospital furnishings that had been used during the delivery only minutes earlier. Outside the room, the maternity ward continued operating normally as nurses and doctors moved between other patients. Authorities later reported that the husband reacted strongly after hearing the statement. The investigation focused on how the discussion escalated from a conversation into a dangerous situation. Within a short time, a firearm was introduced into the environment. Hospitals are designed as healthcare facilities, but incidents involving weapons can occur if security measures fail to detect them at entry points. The presence of a gun immediately changed the situation inside the room. At that moment, the setting was no longer simply a recovery space for a mother and newborn. It had become the location of a critical and rapidly developing incident. The firearm was used during the confrontation. Precious Johnson was shot while still inside the hospital room, where the baby had just been delivered. The sound of the gunshot drew attention from hospital staff working in nearby areas of the maternity ward. Nurses and other personnel moved quickly toward the room after hearing the noise. Medical teams are trained to respond immediately to emergencies, and staff members attempted to determine what had happened as soon as they reached the scene. The sudden event disrupted the normal activity of the hospital floor and created an urgent situation requiring both medical and law enforcement response. Medical workers attempted to provide assistance when they entered the room. Emergency procedures are standard in hospitals when patients experience critical injuries. Staff members focus on evaluating Precious Johnson's condition while ensuring the safety of the newborn present in the room. Despite these efforts, Precious died from the injuries sustained during the shooting. Hospital administrators quickly contacted local authorities to report the incident. Police officers were dispatched to the facility to secure the area and begin gathering information about the confrontation that had just occurred. Once officers arrived, the hospital room became part of an active investigation. Law enforcement secured the location and separated individuals who might have witnessed any part of the event. Detectives began documenting the scene, recording statements from hospital staff, and examining the circumstances that allowed the weapon to enter the building. The husband was taken into custody as authorities began their inquiry into the incident. The newborn child remained under medical supervision while investigators continued to reconstruct the sequence of events that started with conversation and ended with a fatal confrontation inside a hospital maternity ward. After the shooting inside the hospital maternity ward, local law enforcement officers were notified immediately. Emergency calls from hospital staff reported that a serious incident had taken place inside one of the patient rooms. Police units arrived at the hospital shortly afterward and began securing the area to ensure that no further danger was present. Hospitals are normally open environments where many people move through the building each day, so officers first focus on controlling access to the maternity floor. This step allowed investigators to protect potential evidence and prevent the scene from being disturbed. Once the location was secured, detectives and crime scene specialists entered the hospital room where the incident had occurred. Their task was to document the environment and begin the formal process of examining what had taken place. Crime scene investigators started by carefully recording the layout of the hospital room. Photographs were taken from different angles to capture position of furniture, medical equipment, and other objects inside the space. Evidence markers were placed wherever items of importance were located. Investigators also looked for physical evidence related to the firearm that had been used. Hospitals contain many surfaces that can hold fingerprints or other trace evidence, so technicians followed standard procedures to preserve anything that might help reconstruct the sequence of events. The goal of this process was to create a clear record of the scene before anything inside the room was moved or removed. While the forensic team worked inside the room, other officers began interviewing people who had been present in the hospital at the time of the incident. Nurses, doctors, and other medical staff were asked to describe what they heard or observed during the moments surrounding the gunshot. Witness statements are an important part of many investigations because they help establish a timeline of events. Detectives also asked hospital employees about visitor access to the maternity ward. They needed to understand how the husband entered the area and whether any security procedures had been followed at the hospital entrance. Each statement collected by investigators was documented and later compared with other pieces of evidence. Another part of the investigation involved reviewing hospital security footage. Many medical facilities have cameras placed in hallways, entrances, and public areas to monitor activity within the building. Detectives examined these recordings to track movement on the maternity floor before and after the incident occurred. The The footage allowed investigators to observe when the husband arrived at the hospital and how he moved through the building. Video evidence can help confirm or challenge statements made by witnesses because it provides a visual timeline of events. By studying the recordings, police worked to determine whether anyone else had entered the hospital room or if the confrontation occurred solely between the two adults inside. Police also focus on understanding how a firearm was brought into the hospital. Medical facilities typically rely on security policies to prevent dangerous items from entering patient areas. Investigators examined whether there were metal detectors, bag checks, or other screening measures at the hospital entrance. They also reviewed the building's visitor policies to see how guests were admitted to the maternity ward. Determining how the weapon entered the building was an important step in understanding the broader circumstances of the case. This part of the investigation could also reveal whether changes in hospital security might be necessary to prevent similar incidents in the future. At the same time, detectives collected background information about the individuals involved in the case. This process often includes reviewing personal histories, communication records, and prior interactions that may provide context for the incident. Investigators examined the relationship between Precious Johnson and her husband to see whether there had been previous disputes or significant events leading up to the confrontation. Officers may also review phone records or messages when they believe those communications could help clarify the timeline. These steps are commonly used in criminal investigations to develop a more complete understanding of what occurred before the incident took place. As the investigation continued, law enforcement compiled all collected evidence into a structured case file. This file included photographs, witness statements, security footage analysis, and forensic reports. Detectives used this information to reconstruct a sequence of events beginning with the husband's arrival at the hospital and ending with the shooting inside the maternity room. Once the evidence was organized, the case could be presented to prosecutors for legal review. The purpose of the investigation was to establish the facts of the incident and determine what charges, if any, would move forward within the criminal justice system. The events that took place inside the hospital maternity ward created consequences that extended beyond the immediate incident. When situations like this occur in a medical facility, they affect several groups at the same time. Hospital administrators, healthcare workers, investigators, and family members are all involved in the process that follows. After the shooting, the hospital environment changed from routine patient care to emergency response and investigation. Staff members had to pause their normal activities while law enforcement secured a location and documented the scene. Medical facilities are designed to focus on treatment and recovery, so an incident involving violence requires the institution to quickly adapt to a different set of procedures that include security coordination and cooperation with police authorities. For hospital staff, the incident introduced operational challenges that required immediate attention. Maternity wards typically function on carefully planned schedules where doctors and nurses move between patients providing care. When an unexpected event occurs, those schedules must be adjusted to maintain safety for everyone in the building. Administrators reviewed access to the maternity floor and evaluated how visitors move through the hospital. Situations like this often lead institutions to examine their policies regarding visitor identification, entrance monitoring, and security presence within sensitive areas such as maternity units. Hospitals are responsible for providing a controlled environment for patients, and any disruption inside the facility prompts a review of procedures to ensure similar events can be prevented in the future. The impact of the tragedy also affected the investigation process conducted by law enforcement. Cases involving incidents in public institutions often receive significant attention from investigators because they involve both personal actions and institutional environments. Police departments gather detailed records to understand how the event unfolded and whether any external factors contributed to it. Detectives continued reviewing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing information gathered during the early stages of case. The goal of these steps is to ensure that the legal process has accurate documentation of the events that occurred. When incidents happen in places such as hospitals, the investigation also considers the interaction between private individuals and public spaces. Another major impact of the situation centered on the newborn child who survived the event. A child born during such circumstances begins life under conditions that require immediate attention from both medical professionals and legal authorities. Hospitals are responsible for ensuring the health of newborns regardless of the surrounding situation. At the same time, government agencies may become involved in determining guardianship or care arrangements when both parents are unable to assume responsibility. The presence of a newborn in this case added another dimension to the response that followed the incident. Medical staff focus on maintaining the infant's stability, while social services and legal systems address questions about the child's future care. Community reaction is also a common outcome when serious incidents occur in places that people normally associate with safety. Hospitals are locations where individuals expect protection, medical assistance, and professional supervision. When an event disrupts that expectation, members of the public often begin discussing security policies and emergency preparedness within healthcare environments. Local authorities sometimes review existing regulations to determine whether adjustments are needed. Public conversations may focus on issues such as visitor screening, security personnel placement, and access control for areas like maternity wards. These discussions reflect how a single incident can influence broader conversations about safety in community institutions. The legal process that follows incidents like this also shapes the long-term impact. Once investigators complete their work, prosecutors examine the collected evidence to determine how the case will proceed within the court system. Legal proceedings may include formal charges, court hearings, and reviews of testimony from witnesses and experts. During this stage, the justice system evaluates the facts established by the investigation and determines the appropriate legal outcomes. Court proceedings are structured to analyze the available evidence and apply the law to the circumstances described in the case file. This process can take months or longer depending on the complexity of the situation. Over time, the event becomes part of a broader record that includes investigative reports, legal documents, and institutional reviews. These records serve as reference points for law enforcement agencies, hospital administrators, and policymakers who study incidents in order to improve procedures and safety standards. Cases involving violence in public institutions often lead organizations to examine how systems operate under unexpected conditions. By reviewing the events and responses that followed the shooting, authorities aim to identify areas where improvements can be made. The long-term impact therefore extends beyond the original incident, influencing how institutions evaluate security practices, emergency coordination, and protective measures for patients and staff in the future. The events surrounding the death of Precious Johnson brought the case to a point where investigators, medical staff, and legal authorities had complete their responsibilities step by step. By the time the initial emergency response ended, the hospital room had already been examined by forensic teams and documented as part of the investigation. Evidence gathered during the early hours after the incident formed the foundation of the case file used by detectives and prosecutors. Each report prepared by law enforcement described the physical environment, the statements of witnesses, and the timeline established through collected information. Closing stages of a criminal case often focus on organizing this material into a clear record that can be reviewed by courts and legal professionals. The goal of this stage is to ensure that every detail has been documented in a structured and accurate manner. The hospital where the incident occurred also completed its own internal reviews. Medical institutions are required to examine serious events that take place inside their facilities. Administrators reviewed visitor access procedures, staff response times, and coordination with emergency services. Hospitals regularly analyze these situations to determine whether any security improvements are needed. Such reviews may involve meetings with security teams, healthcare managers, and legal advisors who assess how policies function during unexpected events. This type of institutional evaluation is a standard practice whenever safety issues arise inside a medical environment. By examining how the incident unfolded within the building, administrators attempt to identify ways to strengthen protection for patients, staff, and visitors in the future. Law enforcement authorities continue to move the case through the legal system. After collecting all available evidence, investigators compiled reports summarizing their findings. These documents included witness statements, forensic results, and analysis of the scene inside the hospital room. Prosecutors rely on these materials when deciding how a case will proceed in court. Legal processes typically require careful examination of evidence before formal charges or hearings move forward. The court system operates through scheduled proceedings where attorneys, judges, and investigators review the facts gathered during the investigation. Through this structured process, the justice system determines how the law applies to the events described in the case file. At the same time, attention remains on the newborn child who survived the incident. Hospitals are responsible for care of infants immediately after birth, and medical staff continued monitoring the baby's health. Situations where both parents are unable to provide care often require involvement from social service agencies or extended family members. Authorities may review family connections, guardianship options, and legal responsibilities regarding the child's future. These decisions are handled through established legal channels designed to protect the welfare of minors. While investigators focus on the criminal case, other professionals worked on ensuring that the newborn's needs were addressed and that proper care arrangements were made. The conclusion of the investigative stage does not always mean the story immediately ends. Many cases continue through months of legal review and court procedures. During this period, attorneys examine evidence and prepare legal arguments related to the charges under consideration. Court hearings allow both sides to present information and respond to questions raised by the judge or jury. This part of the process is designed to evaluate the facts and apply the law in a structured and transparent manner. Each stage of the legal system follows established procedures intended to maintain fairness and accountability. By the time a case reaches its final outcome, it has usually passed through several layers of review and documentation beyond the courtroom. The case also becomes part of public records that can later be studied by professionals working in law enforcement, healthcare administration, and public safety policy. Incidents that occur in sensitive locations such as hospitals are often examined by experts who analyze how institutions respond to emergencies. Reports generated from these reviews may be used to improve security planning and staff training programs. Organizations responsible for public safety frequently analyze past events to better understand how similar situations might be prevented in the future. Through these evaluations, lessons learned from one case can influence policies and procedures in other locations. The story of Precious Johnson therefore closes with several parallel processes reaching completion. Investigators documented the incident, hospital administrators reviewed their procedures, and legal authorities began handling the case through the justice system. At the center of the story remains a moment that took place inside a hospital maternity room where a newborn child had just been delivered. What began as a medical event involving the birth of a baby became the subject of an extensive investigation and legal examination. By the end of the process, the case stands as a documented record of events analyzed by investigators, reviewed by institutions, and addressed through the legal framework responsible for handling criminal incidents. Here at Unseen Crime Dossiers, we're driven by a mission to uncover hidden realities, honor forgotten voices, and keep their memories alive. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, there's more coming that will challenge you even deeper. Make sure to hit subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a case. We're dropping new episodes regularly, and trust us, what's ahead is even more chilling. Before you go, we want to hear from you. What moment hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Your perspective matters, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, stay alert, stay informed, and never stop seeking the truth, because every life deserves to be heard. Thanks you all for watching.